You're way up there.
I'll be okay. Thank you, George. And good evening, former Vice President Biden.
Good evening.
Many people believe that the true swing demographic in this election will be black voters under the age of 30. Not because they'll be voting for Trump, but because they won't vote at all. I myself have had this exact same conflict. So my question for you then is, besides you ain't black, what do you have to say to young black voters who see voting for you as further participation in a system that continually fails to protect them?
Well, I say, first of all, as my buddy John Lewis said, it's a sacred opportunity and right to vote. You can make a difference. If young black women and men vote, you can determine the outcome of this election. Not a joke. You can do that. And the next question is, am I worthy of your vote? Can I earn your vote? And the answer is, there's two things I think that I care, and I've demonstrated I care about my whole career. One is, in addition to dealing with a criminal justice system to make it fair and make it more decent, we have to be able to put black Americans in a position to be able to gain wealth, generate wealth. And so you look at what that entails. It entails everything from early education. That's why I'm supporting making sure that we in Title I schools, as you know, schools with the least tax base to be able to support their schools. I increased the funding for them from $15 to $45 billion. That allows every teacher in that school to make up to $60,000. And the problem now is they're leaving the schools. They're not there. We're short about 1.5 million teachers, 1.25 million teachers. Number two, every 3-, 4-, and 5-year-old will go to school, not daycare, school. And what all the great universities, including the one you've gone to, go to or went to, in fact, talks about in the last 8 years, what's happened. What happens when you let them go to school, they make up rapidly whatever shortcoming they had in terms of their education prior to that. They have not heard as many words spoken, et cetera, et cetera. What happens is that the studies show that 58% will increase by 58% their chance of going all through 12 years of school and going through successfully. We'll also provide for the ability to bring in social workers and school psychologists. We have one school psychologist in America now for every 1,507 kids. It should be 1 to 500, not just in schools that are poor, but in all schools. Because we learned that, for example, drug abuse doesn't cause mental illness. Mental illness causes drug abuse, the failure to get hold of people and deal with their anxieties. In addition to that, I provide for $70 billion for HBCUs for them to be able to have the wherewithal to do what other universities can do because they don't have the kind of foundational support they need. And so that would allow them, for example, like we did in our administration, the president allowed me to go down and we awarded a cybersecurity laboratory, ability to compete for a cybersecurity laboratory. The federal government spends billions of dollars a year on universities because they're the best kept secret or where most of the major inventions come out of. And so that school now will be able to produce young black women and men who are going to go into a field of the future that's burgeoning, cybersecurity. And that's what's going to help a great deal. In addition to that, if you're a young man about to graduate or you graduated from school and you want to own your first home or well, it's awful hard to get the money, depending on the background, what your economic background is, to get a down payment. So we're going to guarantee first-term home buyers a $15,000 down payment for first-term home buyers. In addition to that, what all the studies now show, and I've been arguing this for a long time, is young black entrepreneurs are just as successful as white entrepreneurs or anyone else given a shot. But you can't get the money. Where do you go to get the startup money? So what President Obama and I did, we had a program where we took $1.5 billion and we invested it in all the SBAs around the country, in the state SBAs, small business associations, and that generated $30 billion came off the sideline. Because if you have a guarantee of $200,000 for your new startup enterprise, young entrepreneur, you're going to be able to attract, if it's government money as a guarantee, you'll be able to attract another $100,000. It generated $30 billion. Well, I'm changing that program, and I'll get this done without much trouble, I believe, in the Congress, from from $1.5 billion to $30 billion to $30 billion. That'll take $300 billion off the sideline and grow because you know. And for example, if you, in fact, and I were the same age and we split our differences and we were the same age and we went to the same builder to buy us each the same home. But my home was in a white neighborhood on one side of a highway and yours is in a black neighborhood. Same exact home. Your home will start off being valued 29% less than my home. Yet your insurance for that home will be higher. You'll be taxed more for it. We've got to end this. That's what got me involved in politics in the first place, a thing called redlining. We can change so much that we can do so much to change the circumstances to give people a real opportunity.
Cedric, did you hear what you needed?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I was just saying, do you hear what you needed to hear?
I think so.
Okay.
Well, there's a lot more if you want to. If you're going to hang around afterwards, I'll tell you more.
Okay.
Let's get
No, but I really mean it. It is the key. Look, this is the way every other. How do most, like my dad, he lost his job up in Scranton. And it took him 3 years to be able, he moved down to Delaware, to Claymont, Delaware, a little steel town, and sent us home to our grandpa to live with him. We finally got back. We lived in apartments, became 6 and 8 housing much later. It wasn't. It was just normal apartments. But it took him 5 years to be able to buy a home. Well, we bought a 3-bedroom home with 4 kids and a grandpa living with us, but it accumulated wealth. You build up wealth. That's how middle-class folks make it. They build up wealth. Then he was able to borrow a little against that to be able to help us to get to school, those kinds of things. It's about accumulating wealth. And you're behind an 8 ball. The vast majority of people of color are behind an 8 ball. And it's the same way what's going on now with all this money that's been voted. What's happened? You go to the bank if you're a black businessman, and the president fired the only inspector general to oversee all this help coming from the Congress. And what happens? You go in and they say, do you have an account here? No. Do you have a credit card with this? No. Have you borrowed from us before? No. We bail these suckers out. They're not liable for any of the money, but they still won't rent it. They still won't lend it to you. We got to change that. It's about accumulating wealth.
Want to get another question in here from
We keep talking about this thing as being north versus south. That's not the issue. It is rural versus urban. And most of the busing that's taken place to date has taken place in rural areas, whether it's be administratively ordered or court ordered. Now we're moving into applying the same standards to urban areas. And it is a standard that doesn't make sense. It doesn't apply. It doesn't hold. We're moving from trying to, in urban areas, we've had integrated facilities but segregated neighborhoods. And in rural areas, we've traditionally had integrated neighborhoods but segregated facilities. And they've applied the same standard and the same test. So this north-south thing is not really the issue. As Professor Nathan Glazer at Harvard has indicated, as Dr. Armour of the Rand Corporation, as James Coleman, as I just held 3 days of hearing, two days of hearings in the Judiciary Committee on another bill I have, beyond this that deals with busing. And there is uniform opinion of those who testified that it is not a north-south, it's an urban-rural question, a distinction.
But no matter what your intent, there are going to be those who say it's a segregated thing, it's a question of race, and that you have set back the movement of desegregation of schools. How would you answer that?
The way I answer that is I predict that the young black leadership of America will overwhelmingly decide with me. I predict that in 1980 and 84, my position will be totally vindicated.
Vice President Biden, do you agree today that you were wrong to oppose busing in America then?
No,
do you agree?
I did not oppose busing in America. What I opposed is busing ordered by the Department of Education. That's what I opposed.
Well, there was a failure of states to integrate public schools in America. I was part of the second class to integrate Berkeley, California public schools almost 2 decades after Brown v. Board of Education.
Because your city council made that decision. It was a local decision.
So that's where the federal government must step in. That's why we have the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act. That's why we need to pass the equality.
When I marched in the Civil Rights Movement, I did not march with a 12-point program. I marched with tens of thousands of others to change attitudes. And we changed attitudes. When I was 17 years old, like many of you, I participated in sit-ins to desegregate the restaurants and movie houses of Wilmington, Delaware. I came out of the civil rights movement. I was one of those guys that sat in and marched and all that stuff. During the 60s, I was, in fact, very concerned about the civil rights movement. I was not an activist. I worked at an all-black swimming pool in the east side of Wilmington, Delaware. I was involved. I was involved in what they were thinking, what they were feeling. I was involved, but I was not out marching. I was not down in Selma. I was not anywhere else. I was a suburbanite kid who got a dose of exposure to what was happening to black Americans when I'm in my own city.
You know, when I was a teenager in Delaware, for real, I got involved in the civil rights movement. We have the 8th largest black population in America. Most people don't know that. And I'd go to 8 o'clock Mass, then I'd go to Reverend Herring's church where we'd meet in order to organize and figure where we were going to go, whether we were going to desegregate the Rialto movie theater or what we were going to do. I got my education for real in the black church. And that's not hyperbole, it's a fact. But I got my education, Reverend Doc, in the black church. Not a joke. Because when we used to get organized on Sundays to go out and desegregate movie theaters and things like that, we'd do it through the black church. I was no big shakes, Reverend, in the civil rights movement. I was just a kid. I got involved in desegregated movie theaters and helping, you may remember Reverend Moyer in Delaware and Herman Holloway organized voter registration drives, coming out of black churches on Sundays, figuring how we were going to move. In October, I was invited to the National Civil Rights Museum in Memphis to receive the Freedom Award, a thing when I sat in black churches on the east side of Wilmington getting ready to, and by the way, next to two Jewish rabbis, getting ready to go out and desegregate movie theaters in Delaware. I never, ever thought in my life I would be worthy of, and I'm still not sure I'm worthy of it.
Right now, you cannot talk about the Democratic race without talking about Joe Biden. Not only is he the front runner and former host of The Price is Right, but he's been leading in the polls since the day he announced his run. But that doesn't mean it's been smooth sailing. He took heat for flip-flopping on a major abortion policy. He faced questions about his voting record. And of course, we all remember when he had to apologize for giving people surprise massages. Yes. Now, surprise being the operative word, because massages are nice, but nobody wants a surprise massage. Yeah, just like a road trip is great, but a surprise road trip is just kidnapping. And this week, Biden has continued his scandal streak with comments he made about missing the old days.
Joe Biden is under fire this evening on comments he made about working alongside segregationist senators in the past.
Biden recalling his early Senate career, bringing up two segregationist senators, Herman Talmadge and James Eastland, who called African Americans an inferior race. I was in a caucus with James O. Eastland, Biden said. He never called me boy, he always called me son. At least there was some civility. We got things done. We didn't agree on much of anything. We got things done.
Biden made the comments despite his aides having long urged him not to discuss his relationships with segregationist senators.
Joe Biden, what are you doing? You can't come out in 2019 and say that these two senators from back in the day were super racist, but at least they were civil. Yeah, civil to you, maybe. Of course, they never called you boy. You're white. Biden's running around like, I work with these senators, Senator Eastland many times, and not once did he call me the N-word. Yeah. Oh, I mean, there was that one time, but I had a tan, so I understand. Now, the reason Joe Biden told this story, even though his advisors told him not to, is because he's trying to set himself up as the guy who can work with adversaries in Congress, even if he disagrees with their views. The problem is, by saying this, he may have created new adversaries within his own party.
Those comments have prompted swift criticism from his 2020 rivals, including Kamala Harris, who weighed in moments ago.
To coddle the reputations of segregationists, of people who, if they had their way, I would literally not be standing here as a member of the United States Senate, is, I think, it's misinformed and it's wrong.
Now, Senator Cory Booker was among the first candidates to come out and push back on Biden for these comments. He said Vice President Biden's relationships with proud segregationists are not the model for how we make America a safer and more inclusive place for Black people and for everyone. And frankly, I'm disappointed that he hasn't issued an immediate apology.
Yeah, I get what these senators are saying. You see, for many people, it felt like Joe Biden was saying that being polite was more important than not being racist, which is not how Black people feel. No Black person's like, I know they think we're subhuman as a species, but at least they said, go back to Africa, please. And now I would believe it if Biden said that his story wasn't meant to offend Black people and that his comments were taken the wrong way. But he definitely didn't help himself when he responded to the criticism like this.
This morning, a defiant Joe Biden is refusing calls to apologize for comments that he made about finding common ground with a senator who supported segregation.
I ran for the United States Senate because I disagreed with the views of the segregationists. The point I'm making is you don't have to agree.
Are you going to apologize like Cory Booker has
Apologize for what?
Cory Booker's called for it.
Cory should apologize. He knows better. There's not a racist bone in my body. I've been involved in civil rights my whole career.
Whoa, Joe.
The American Negro, is that not how you say it? The Negro in America. Come on, Joe.
I don't buy the concept popular in the 60s, which said we have suppressed the Black man for 300 years, and the white man is now far ahead in the race for everything we offer in this society.
We decided we were going to change the world, and we did. We did. We finished the civil rights movement to the first stage.
Word.
I mean, you got the first sort of mainstream African American who is articulate and bright and clean.
We must make the streets safer. I don't care why someone is a malfactor in society. I don't care why someone is antisocial. We have an obligation to cordon them off from the rest of society, try to help them, try to change their behavior. That's why we do in this bill. We have drug treatment and we have other treatments to try to deal with it. But they are in jail. Away from my mother, your husband, our families. We would be absolutely stupid as a society if we didn't recognize the condition that nurtured those folks.
If you didn't already know it, it's pretty clear the incredible esteem your father was held in. I know you've known that your whole life. To my fellow members of the Senate, you know, I was telling the president when I got elected the last time, and I had the great honor of running with the president, and I was elected vice president and United States senator in the same day for my 7th term. And in talking to, and I got sworn in for that 7th term because we thought we might need a vote there in those first couple weeks. And every time I sat with a leader, I never called Senator Byrd Senator. I always called him leader. When I sat with a leader, I could see that look in his face, and he said, Joe, you sure you're making the right decision giving up the Senate for vice president? Because as the senators know, he revered the Senate. As Danny Inouye said going into the chamber when we were going in to honor your father, yesterday we walked in together. He said, you know, Joe, had you stayed, you'd be number 2. I'm still number 2, Danny. I'm still number 2. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. President, yesterday I had the opportunity to pay my respects to Leader Byrd as he lay in repose in the Senate chamber. I met the family then and again today, and the last time that happened was 50 years ago. The last time that that chamber I revere served as a resting place for anyone was 50 years ago. But although I and my colleagues behind me revere the Senate, Robert C. Byrd elevated the Senate. Other great men and their families would have chosen for them to lay in state in the rotunda. But Bob Byrd and his family chose to lay in state in the Senate chamber. And to me, this is completely appropriate, having served with them for 36 plus years. For the Senate chamber was Robert C. Byrd's cathedral. The Senate chamber was his cathedral, and West Virginia was his heaven. And there's not a lot of hyperbole in that. Every person in the Senate, as my colleagues behind you can tell you, brings something special about them. I'll never forget having privately criticized a senator when I was there the first year. I was sitting with the previous leader, Senator Mansfield, who was an incredible guy. And he told me that, he said, why are you upset? And I told him about a particular senator railing against something I thought was very worthy, the Americans with Disability Act. And he went on to tell me that every member of the Senate represented something in the eyes of their state that was special and represented a piece of their state. Well, if there was ever a senator who was the embodiment of his state, if there was ever a senator who in fact reflected his state, it was Robert C. Byrd. The fact of the matter is, the pick of the banjo, the sweet sound of the fiddle, ramp dinners in the spring, country fairs in the summer, the beauty of the laurels in the mountains, the rush of the rapids through the valleys. These things not only describe West Virginia, but from an outsider's point of view, who's been here many times at the invitation of Jennings Randolph and Robert C. Byrd, it seems to me they define a way of life. It's more than just a state. And Robert C. Byrd was the most fierce defender of not only the state, but the way of life. I think the most fierce defender that probably this state has ever known in its history. You know, Robert Byrd did use the phrase, "When I die, West Virginia will be written on my heart," and I used to kid him. I said, "You have so many Scotch-Irish down there, you don't acknowledge it was an Irish Catholic named Joyce who said that first." Reverend, he quoted everybody else, but when he used that phrase, he'd never acknowledge that it was James Joyce who said, "When I die, Dublin will be written in my heart." And all he would do is laugh. The fact of the matter is, West Virginia was not only written in his heart, but he wore it on his sleeve. He took such pride in this place. He took such pride in all of you. I remember he asked me one of the few races he had, there was a race, whether I'd come down, because I was the young guy, and I'd come down and demonstrate to everybody that I could not keep up with Robert C. Byrd, which happened to be true. And I think, Nick, you were at the dinner. We had a Jefferson Jackson Day dinner and down here, and Robert C. Byrd did something never happened before with me in all the dinners I've spoken at. He stood up and he said, "We're honored to have Senator Joe Biden from Delaware here tonight. And Joe, I'd like to introduce you to West Virginia." Then he spent, as Nick will remember, the next probably 10 minutes talking about everyone in the audience by name, where they were from, what they had done, how they had fought through difficulty. And then he said, kind of like Johnny Carson, "Here's Joe." Well, I thought it was pretty impressive, literally. Robert C. Byrd asked me to speak, but he knew the privilege was mine, not the people to whom I was speaking. He was devoted to all of you like few senators in the 37 years I was there, 36 plus years I was there, that I have ever known. He was fiercely devoted, as you've all heard, to his principles. Even once he became power, he always spoke truth to power, standing up for the people he proudly was part of. And you've heard it many times a day, but it bears repeating again in defense of the Constitution he revered. I always wore a flag pin, but I was afraid he'd be looking down today, because every time I'd wear the flag pin on the floor, he would grab me, take my pin, and put on a Constitution pin. That's the pin I'm wearing. So, boss, I'm wearing the pin. And you ain't black.